Minh Thúy xin kính chào quý vị hôm nay thứ Sáu, 26 tháng 7, 2024. Đến với VA TV hôm nay gồm có phỏng vấn đặc biệt và nhạc lá bồ đề. Kính thưa quý vị, vào năm 1966 và năm 1967, có nhiều chiến lược quân sự được đưa ra để kết hợp với các chính sách ngoại giao nhằm đạt được kết quả thỏa đáng. Khi trở về Mỹ trong khoảng thời gian năm 1966 đến năm 1967, thì ông Frank Scotton đã được các bạn thân giới thiệu để cho ông có thể thuyết trình riêng cho Bộ Trưởng Lục Quân Mỹ. Trong cuộc tiếp xúc đó thì ông Frank Scotton đã đưa ra chiến lược theo cái nhìn riêng của ông. Chiến lược đó khác hẳn với chiến lược rượt bắt mà ông cho là vô hiệu. Trong cuộc gặp gỡ với Bộ Trưởng Lục Quân thì ông Frank Scotton đã trình bày chẳng những chiến lược quân sự mà còn đưa ra những sự suy nghĩ trên khía cạnh ngoại giao của Mỹ với thế giới và khía cạnh chính trị của Việt Nam trong tiến trình dân chủ. Xin mời quý vị cùng theo dõi những suy nghĩ của ông Frank Scotton trong những năm 1966 đến năm 1967. Đây là thời điểm 1 năm và 2 năm trước Tết Mậu Thân. Tuy không bị chỉ trích, nhưng quan điểm của ông cũng không được áp dụng. Minh Thúy mời quý vị theo dõi cái nhìn của ông Frank Scotton đối với tiến trình Việt Nam và đề nghị của ông về cách can thiệp quân sự của Mỹ qua cái nhìn mà ông gọi là hàng rào người. Trong phần chính phỏng vấn đặc biệt do Phan Lê Dũng, Võ Thành Nhân và Minh Thúy thực hiện.
So, would you say the Americanization of the war, if it could be called that, was that at the right time? Was that the right decision, or was that just something?
Well, again, I had a falling out. Two friends of mine, Jack Galvin, who later became the NATO commander, and much later, and Jack Gibney, who worked with me on a couple of projects. They knew in 66, 67, I think it was, when I was going back to Washington at one point, and I guess it was in 67, and they arranged for me to see the Secretary of the Army. At the time, Gibney had been a classmate at West Point of Jack Galvin, and Galvin was the military assistant to the Secretary of the Army. So they provided me with an opportunity, and I went in there, and I'd already tried to make the case in Saigon to no avail. And I with the Secretary of the Army, Stan Resor, who was a World War II veteran, I tried to make the case for creating a barrier, a human barrier, using the American forces from Lao Bao on the Lao border with Quang Tri across to Savannakhet on the Mekong, and not allowing anything from the north to come south. And Secretary Resor listened politely, and I said that the world would yell and scream, particularly those sympathetic to the communists, and we would have to make the case that replace us with a United Nations peacekeeping force, but isolate the North from the South. And I told him that if we do not isolate the North from the South, then we will eventually lose. Because I said, you have to understand, the government of North Vietnam is not a government of North Vietnamese. It's a government of Central Vietnamese, one prominent North Vietnamese, but who, by our source, has already married a Southerner at that time. And his life has been spent in the war against the French and now the war against the government of South Vietnam in the South. So you're not talking about a North Vietnamese government. You're talking about you might almost say a Central Vietnamese government that's trying to unify the country. So I said, if we do not isolate the North from the South and accept the yelling and screaming that will happen until the UN can replace us, we can't win this, because Americans will get tired. We got tired in Korea. We got tired in other places.
So you're arguing for somewhere in the middle, not exactly intervention, but not exactly withdrawal. Also, it's just introducing.
I didn't see us as intervening in the North.
No.
My feeling was, let the North be the North, but don't let the North take over don't let Central Vietnamese communists take over the South.
Yes,
and make it a unified.
That's why I say that
country.
You're recommending the course of just prevention.
Prevention. So that have that barrier. And I said, then, just as in Korea, it took decades, but you have time for representative government to evolve. That will happen in South Vietnam too, but you have to preserve a distinct South Vietnam identity, and the way to do that is a barrier. But if we don't do that barrier, I don't see us.
Do you see the barrier as the same thing as the American Knights of the War that the American did, except they don't establish that barrier, but they still put that much of American there? Would the barrier still take the same amount of soldier coming to Vietnam like that?
Oh, it might have taken less.
It might have
taken less because the problem with the presence there were a lot of problems with respect to the presence of American forces in the South, but one of them was that you had to sprinkle them countrywide, and there was this game that children used to play called whack-a-mole. You were playing whack-a-mole countrywide, but as you were playing whack-a-mole, you were also killing a lot of South Vietnamese innocently. I mean, the conduct of the 9th Division in the Mekong Delta area and what it meant in terms of civilian casualties, civilian displacements, was so great that was the first division chosen by MACV to be withdrawn. John Paul Van referred to the 9th as the bloody 9th American Division. Yeah,
you're talking about John Paul Van. Tell us more about him and how's your contact with him, and what's your impression of his performance and things like that?
Again, my introduction to him was via Ev Baumgardner and Rufus Phillips, and I thought of him as when I first met him as a cocky, boastful, pushy, arrogant kind of guy. But I came to be impressed by his commitment, his activity, his range of friendships and contacts, and I think it was okay. And I was with him. I don't know if I put it in the book or not, but I was with him once when he transferred to 2 Corps. Colby allowed me to go up and spend a couple of weeks kind of helping him adjust to the difference between the Mekong Delta and 2 Corps. And at one point there'd been an outpost overrun near Cheo Reo in Phu Province. And we went down there in his helicopter piloted by Warrant Officer Richards, and we found a surviving regional forces soldier, badly wounded. So I got in the back of the little Loach helicopter, and Van lifted the guy in and kind of astride me, and we headed back up to Pleiku to get to the hospital. Well, en route, sometime before we touched down, that regional forces soldier died as I was holding him. And when we landed and Van walked around, I said, he's gone. And Van went over to the tail towards the thing. I mean, I was afraid he might walk into the rotor, but he didn't get that far, but he just went towards the tail, and then he started pounding, on the thing and saying, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, we could have saved that little guy's life, and for the moment, more than anything else in the world, that's what mattered to him, is he tried to save the guy, and the guy died. So Van was I would say, a kind of an exotic guy, but definitely committed, and I liked him.
Do you feel like he worked well with the American, and the American understand him more than the Vietnamese, kind of? Because what you were saying in the beginning about his being bombastic and arrogant and all that, does that make any impact on the Vietnamese with whom he worked?
I think that the Vietnamese that understood his degree of commitment, the totality of his commitment, they overlooked
his weakness,
his extreme personality in some ways. I think that Van is one of those people that you either liked him or you didn't like him. I liked him for what I saw that within him that made it possible for him to get some things done.
Minh Thúy xin kính chào quý vị. Hôm nay thứ Sáu, 2 tháng 8, 2024. Đến với VATV hôm nay gồm có phỏng vấn đặc biệt và nhạc lá bồ đề. Kính thưa quý vị, John Paul Van là một nhân vật gây tranh luận sôi nổi trong cả nội bộ quân sự lẫn dân sự của hai phe Mỹ và Việt Nam. Ông là một trong những người đặc biệt, nếu không muốn nói là người đặc biệt nhất trong cả hai giới dân sự và quân sự. Trong giới quân sự Việt Nam thì ông Van đã gây nhiều tai tiếng khi là cố vấn cho tướng Huỳnh Văn Cao và đã to tiếng với tướng Lý Tòng Bá trong trận ấp Bắc. Một trong những trận đầu tiên giới truyền thông Mỹ đăng tải rộng rãi về sự thiếu kỷ luật và thiếu tinh thần chiến đấu của binh lính Việt Nam Cộng Hòa dưới thời đệ nhất Cộng Hòa. Trong quân đội Mỹ thì ông Van đã tỏ ra khinh miệt, bất cần, giấu giếm tướng Paul Hawking, vị chỉ huy cao cấp nhất của Bộ Tư lệnh Viện trợ Quân sự Việt Nam, bị triệu hồi về Mỹ vì bướng bỉnh. Ông Van lại được đưa trở lại Việt Nam như một nhân viên dân sự ở cấp tướng và được cử làm cố vấn cho tướng Ngô Du. Ông Van bị tử nạn khi trực thăng rơi ở Compton. Ông Frank Scotton đã tiếp xúc và làm việc với John Paul Van. Ông Van đã yêu cầu phòng thông tin đưa Frank Scotton về làm việc với ông, nhưng yêu cầu đó đã bị từ chối. Trong phần phỏng vấn này, thì Minh Thúy mời quý vị theo dõi tiếp xúc của ông Frank Scotton và những suy nghĩ của ông về con người và cách làm việc của Trung tá John Paul Van trong cuộc chiến Việt Nam qua phần 10 phỏng vấn đặc biệt do Phan Lê Dũng, Võ Thành Nhân và Minh Thúy thực hiện.
Just the operational guy. That makes it happen.
Yeah, the operational aspect, I think.
How close did you work with Van? Is it just
Van?
Yes.
Well, I never really worked for him, but when I first met him early in '63, and he was complaining that the 7th Division didn't really know what was going on, even across the river from Mito. I went over one night and spent a day and a night kind of around that ferry landing area, and I did see some communist presence from which I hid cleverly. I told him that it was an evolving country and situation, and he just had to be patient and find the ones that would be good to work with, and that there were some of those like that. His personality, I think, made it difficult for a lot of Vietnamese and a lot of Americans, because He was sometimes a bit shrill. He was argumentative. He wanted you to see his point of view and accept his point of view immediately, and that made it difficult. But alternatively, as a point of consideration, there were a lot of American advisors that didn't give a shit. You know, they were just filling a box on an organizational chart. But Van cared, and Van was going to get out, and he was going to try to get things done. So I think, in many respects, you might not be in complete accord with someone, but if you can see that they were trying to get things done, then you could work with them. Again, my brother Frank Snett may have something to say about George Jacobson, who we call sometimes Jake, or Sam Wilson of Merrill's Marauders fame in World War II. You know, I had some differences of opinion with George Jacobson, but on those things that we could reach agreement, then he was worth spending some time with.
I don't want to delve into this, but you know, the bright shining light, Neil Sheehan's so-called the magnum opus about John Paul Van. Yeah. How much of the truth in there do you think it is?
Well, there's a lot of you know, there's a lot of truth to it. I know after it came out, Neil Sheehan, who's I think is also a likable guy, Neil Sheehan, spoke with me and asked me what I thought of the book, and I said, you know, overall I really liked the book, but he went into some detailed discussion of John Van's family background, and said some things about John Van's mother that I thought was just completely unnecessary. But other than that, I thought that Bright Shining Lie is worth a read. If you compare that book with Frankie Fitzgerald's Fire in the Lake, and you've only got room in your rucksack for one book to bring on a field trip, I'd say bring Neil Sheehan's book.
What do you think about the Second Republic with the President Win Van Til?
Well, I think I mentioned in my book that at one point Ev Baumgartner, who always liked to use me as kind of his bird dog, you know, to point, he said he wanted me to go down to Kanto and meet then Corps Commander Tew. And so I said to Ev, I said, yeah, but I heard he's kind of a lightweight, that he's not doing very much. And Ev said, well, lightweight might be good, because might he not then rise to the top?
Well,
so I went down and I did meet him, the only time I met him in my life, and he was, I thought, presented a fairly austere, non-committal appearance. He seemed to have an understanding of what was at work, and in places not at work, in 4 Corps. And my sense is that given the environment, the time, the other personalities within which he had to work, he did fairly well. But you know, and I'll go back to if the American government had adopted the Lao barrier effort that I very much on the margins insignificantly advocated with one person in the cabinet to no avail, then the Republic of Vietnam would have had time
That's what we need.
to mature. Yeah, every country needs time, and that's what would have been needed.
So I know that you're also in touch with the so-called the civilian side rather than the military, like President Thiệu. Do you think there's a possibility that we could have had a civilian leader instead of the military? One like Thiệu. Was that possible?
Well, I think that it may have been eventually possible. I think that Vice President Hung was aged in every way physically at the time, but I applaud what he tried to initiate in terms of the anti-corruption campaign. It was really great. I think that Rector Baum of the Institute of Administration, Jacqueline Baum's husband at the time, was a very perceptive, clean, living, highly qualified person. If he had received an appointment that might have led later to an elected position, all kinds of things could have happened. But the key was providing an opportunity for the South to be isolated from the North. And we weren't doing that. Instead of doing what I felt, if we were going to do anything at all militarily, and that's the first choice you make. Are we going to intervene militarily? And then the second one should be to what end, to what goal, and then the third question should be how to do it. Well, we didn't address the third question successfully.
I think in the jaws of history, for example, Museum was saying that Phan Huy Quat could have been the prime minister and the country would have headed in another direction had he been elected. Or what do you think of that? Is he innocent? I mean, is he ignorant of the thing, or is he just saying for the sake of, presenting a democratic face to the South Vietnam? Or was that a viable option at all?
I don't think that. With respect to everything that those gentlemen had coped with in the 1930s and 1940s, I think that they just weren't up to the task of the 1960s and 1970s.
Okay.
I think that a new era, new leadership was required, and we were unable to create the conditions within which they might have thrived.
Well, nobody knew what's like. Nobody's prepared for the future enough. Nobody's seen far enough into the future to make that kind of preparation that you are referring to.
Yeah, well, in any country, in any set of national circumstances, it's difficult. Look at America today.